I'm going to react to a true crime documentary about serial killer Jesse Mathew Jr. I have 17 years of law enforcement experience. 8 of those years is in criminal investigations. Let's check the video out.
18-year-old Hannah Elizabeth Graham was in her second year of college at the University of Virginia, out for the evening at Charlottesville's downtown pedestrian mall, meeting friends and having drinks, a night any college student would look forward to. But Hannah ended up heavily intoxicated and all alone, that is, until she met a man. Her last words overheard by a passerby on the street were, "I'm not getting in the car with you." And then she was gone.
No trace of Hannah has been found.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Which I haven't seen this. I know nothing about this case. It was titled "The Frightening Story of Hannah Graham." Not a good thing. A late at night, intoxicated person by themselves out on the streets. That's not a good thing.
Hannah Graham was born in England, a daughter of John and Sue Graham and the baby sister of James Graham. At the age of 5, the family moved to the United States, where they made their new home in the Stratford Landing area of Fairfax County, Virginia. A charming neighborhood once known as River Farm. The previous landowner was George Washington. Hannah came from a solid family. She was a happy, bright girl who loved life. Hannah was smart, athletic, musically inclined, and all around a great person bursting with vigor. Until she met Jesse Leroy Mathew Jr. Then the world would go dark and terrifying. In every photo of Hannah Graham, she's always smiling. From childhood to her teenage years, she was full of life. She emitted positivity and enthusiasm and an energy that would light up a room. To those who knew her, she had the potential to take the world by storm. Hannah had an amazing future ahead of her, if not cut short by an evil that too often inflicts the world with its selfish degradation. On September 12, 2014, at around 9:30 p.m., Hannah left her residence at the Grand Mark apartment complex to meet up with friends. They would then be heading to Charlottesville's Fig restaurant around 10:48 p.m. for drinks. Afterwards, Hannah headed to Camden Plaza Apartments on 14th Street to attend a party. At one point, she said she wasn't feeling well and was going to leave. A friend had offered to walk her home, but she refused. Her own apartment building was within walking distance from.
Okay. She was intoxicated. She was going to be out walking in the streets by herself. She told the friend she would be fine. Now that friend should have kept on and on and on and on. Don't let people get out intoxicated by themselves walking streets at night. It's a dangerous situation.
From the Camden Plaza, but when she left the party around midnight, she went in the opposite direction towards the Tempo restaurant located several blocks away. Hannah was captured on surveillance videos as she walked past businesses on her way to the downtown Charlottesville mall where Tempo was located. This would come into play later. It was then technically September the 13th at 12:44 a.m. At 12:56 a.m., she sent a text to one of her friends telling her that she was lost and that she didn't feel well. Hannah was allegedly quite intoxicated at the time she sent the text. Had Hannah gotten turned around by accident, or had the alcohol intoxication caused her marked confusion? Earlier that evening, in another area of...
Probably a little bit of both. And there you go again. She texted at 12:56 a.m. text a friend and said, "Hey, I'm lost, by myself. I don't feel well." Well, where's that friend? I mean, as long as that friend is, 30 miles, 30 minutes away, as long as they're not 2 states away, but you got to take care of your friends.
Uptown, 32-year-old Jesse Mathew, a part-time taxi driver and operating room technician, had headed to the Lazy Parrot for drinks. Afterwards, he began bar hopping through downtown, making several rude and unwanted advances towards women. Those same women would later report that Mathew had stepped over the line with them. After a period of time went by, Mathew and Graham's paths would eventually cross. At first, Mathew let her walk by without drawing attention to himself. And then he saw his moment. He turned and followed her. With Hannah's heavy intoxication, her alertness to her surroundings would have been a little slow, a very dangerous thing considering she was all alone. Surveillance footage seemed to show that Hannah had been wandering around as though disoriented to her time and place. Mathew came up beside her, put his arm around her, and they were now walking together towards the Tempo restaurant. Matthews went inside and bought 2 drinks, and there is some contradiction on whether Hannah was in the bar or outside at a table, and if she was actually served. The last text that Hannah sent to a friend stated, "I got stuck down, though," which made no sense at all to her friend. It was 1 a.m., and it would be the last.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. It may be some younger people talk. Let me know in the comments if you know what that means.
Communication to anyone from Hannah. Had an alleged predator just claimed his next victim? On September 14th, Hannah's friends were very concerned about her and reported her missing. They had last communicated with her in the early morning hours around 1 a.m. on the 13th. Now, friends and family could make no contact with her at all, and no one had seen her. Hannah was not the type of person who would go without informing someone. She was a responsible person, and everyone's concern grew deeper by the minute. Police immediately started a search for Hannah, and the state and federal law enforcement were called in as soon as possible. Hannah's disappearance had hit a nerve. There had been several other females in the past who had gone missing throughout Charlottesville and in Albemarle County. So Hannah's case would gain national attention rather quickly. They needed to find her, and soon. With thorough investigation and collection of surveillance videos around town, law enforcement were able to put together a timeline of Hannah's steps throughout the night up until the last time she was seen and who she was seen with. Known to others as LJ, was raised in poverty, bullied at school, had an issue with stuttering and learning disabilities. Yet he grew up and persevered through every tough turn and earned a full football scholarship to Liberty University. But there was allegedly a dark side to Mathew. He was accused of rape of a female student in 2002 at the university. He quickly left Liberty and enrolled at Christopher Newport University in 2003. But once again, his dark side loomed. There, he was accused of another sexual assault. The victim was not identified. After he left school for good, he just bounced around from job to job. One of those was being a taxi driver in the Charlottesville, Virginia area, and he knew the area well and how to get around. In 2005, a young woman was attacked and raped as she walked home from a store in Fairfax County. It was alleged that he threatened to kill her unless she let him do whatever he wanted. She was left alive and was taken for medical treatment along with having a rape kit done. Investigators were able to lift DNA at the crime scene, build a profile, but the DNA did not come back to any known suspects on law enforcement's database. The woman
Yeah, that happens a lot. It was a good thing that this rape victim they were able to get DNA of the alleged person who did this. But a lot of times people do this and they've never been arrested. They could have done it numerous times, but never arrested. So you don't have their DNA. It doesn't just always throw it in the machine and here's your person. There's a lot of investigation that has to go along with that.
Feared for her life so much that she chose to move back to her home in India. Oddly, family and friends would say that Mathew was a kind-hearted soul willing to help anyone. He was a gentle person with a big heart, they said. Even women he had dated in the past said of their relationships that he was charming and tender. Yet here was Mathew being accused of previous assaults, at least 12 women in all that were known of. It just didn't make sense. One of Mathew's girlfriends even told detectives that he had a rough childhood, and by rough she meant he had been sexually abused. Jesse was sexually abused by at least 3 different individuals throughout his elementary school years. One individual in particular raped him on several occasions and forced him to keep it a secret. I have no doubt this repeated sexual trauma during his developmental years had played a key role in the allegations against him. It was never fully confirmed by either family or friends, but Mathew alleged that the sexual assault had occurred against him while he was growing up. If it were true, it might just explain his Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde persona, going from a nice guy to something else entirely. Had a nature versus nurture issue influenced Mathew's downward spiral towards his own undoing? Mathew's own father drank and was absent from his life at times, and had even been arrested in 2006 for indecent exposure. What kind of example was his father setting for this young man? Could these things have impacted his developmental years, possibly evolving into a serial rapist murderer? Was Jesse lashing out against his past, or giving in to a drive that had emerged from deep within himself? On September 19th, detectives retained a search warrant for Jesse Matthews, labeled as the back-to-school killer's apartment. A cell phone with a missing SIM card was recovered, as were...
I wonder how they knew... At what point... I'm a little lost. At what point did he become a suspect? Oh, maybe from the surveillance videos where they saw him... Okay, saw him... walking with her. Okay, that makes sense now.
men's shorts with DNA. When it was examined, it contained both sperm and DNA from Mathew, but also DNA from Hannah. Her DNA was located also on the passenger side door of Mathew's vehicle. A second warrant was issued the next day to search Mathew's apartment again. Investigators said that he was not charged yet in connection with Hannah's disappearance, but he was the last person to be seen with her on the night she disappeared. With the second search completed, the investigators would leave with several evidence bags in tow. Some of the items were Mathew's Galaxy phone, bedding, pillows, more clothes, a toothbrush, hair samples, a wallet, a cigar butt, and fibers that they had collected. With a third search warrant, investigators collected a pair of white shorts and a maroon-colored shirt, along with a towel with a reddish-brown stain on it. Mathew owned a orange Chrysler Sebring, which was also seized. Investigators called in...
I don't understand why they needed 3 search warrants. I've been involved with a lot of search warrants. And you take as evidence every single little thing that you think you're possibly going to need. I mean, it's really hard to get the court to issue a search warrant. Evidently, this judge issued 3. I've never heard of that before. I don't know why they didn't get everything they needed to begin with.
A bloodhound unit that located Hannah's scent at the rear entrance to Mathew's apartment, the passenger door of his vehicle, and a nearby dumpster. September the 20th, Mathew shows up at the Charlottesville PD asking for a lawyer, but refusing to speak to police about Hannah. It was said that he left the PD, got into a car, and left at a high rate of speed. Investigators in turn tailed him, but he was able to elude them, and a nationwide manhunt went into play. It was also revealed that Mathew had gotten a new driver's license and also had withdrawn most of his money from the bank. A wanted poster was issued for Mathew, described as a black male in his early 30s with dreadlocks and a goatee, just under 6 feet tall and over 260 pounds. He was last seen wearing a white shirt and black jeans, possibly in the possession of his sister's blue Nissan. It was disclosed that Mathew's family had pleaded with him to assist the detectives with any information he was aware of in the disappearance of Hannah Graham. His aunt, named Alice Fletcher, told police...
You may be wondering, her DNA was at his place, in his car, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's guilty of a crime at this point. Remember, it takes probable cause to make an arrest. Do we think he probably did it? Absolutely. But you have to follow the letter of the law, and you have to do everything proper, or it'll get thrown out. And he knew the game. He went in and demanded a lawyer. He knew the game, and he probably knew they didn't have enough at this point to charge him with anything.
Police that the family were trying to do all they could to help Hannah's family find their missing daughter. September 24th, Mathew was spotted on a Texas beach by the Galveston County Sheriff's Department. With Mathew's own vehicle impounded, he had used his sister's blue 1997 Nissan Sentra and was now staying on the beach in a tent. A passerby had recognized Mathew from the news reports and called 911. He was detained by law enforcement officers and extradition was filed. Charlottesville investigators would head to Texas to pick up Mathew. He was officially listed as a suspect in the disappearance of Hannah, and the reward for leads for the discovery of Hannah was set at $100,000.
You know, the reward to find missing Hannah Graham is now up to $100,000, but the man charged with abducting her is now behind bars. We want to show you two key pieces of video from Galveston, Texas, but first take a look at this. This is the new mugshot after being arrested and booked. We know 32-year-old Jesse Mathew had been in Texas since at least Tuesday because here he's seen walking into a convenience store. Police say he purchased bug repellent spray.
Mathew was taken to the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Jail, where he would be held without bond. The search for Hannah Graham would continue. On October the 18th, skeletal remains were found at a property off of Old Lynchburg Road in Albemarle County. The location was in a densely wooded area behind a vacant residence. Investigators expanded the search area to find the rest of the remains.
Today, teams back out searching for more clues. ABC's Bazi Kanani has the latest from Charlottesville.
Tonight, police sealing off what is now a crime scene after the discovery of human remains that could be 18-year-old Hannah Graham. The usually emphatic Charlottesville police chief somber, explaining more tests must be done to confirm the identity and thanking searchers.
A crop top and jeans that looked like the same ones Hannah had been wearing on the night of her disappearance were found nearby. The top was inside out and the pants had one leg inside out. A watch was also found. What wasn't located were the undergarments, shoes, or a cell phone. A nearby resident told investigators that on the morning of September the 13th, they had seen Mathew's car backed into an access road that goes behind the property. The gate was closed and no one was in the vehicle. Investigators learned that Mathew was very familiar with this location. By driving a taxi in the area for the last several years, he would know where the remote and hidden areas would be.
If you're doing something as horrible as this, of trying to get rid of a body, you're definitely going to go somewhere that you're very familiar with, where you know houses are, where you're seen, where you're not seen. And you're going to pick a remote place because you don't want this found for many, many, many years.
Remains were transported to the chief medical examiner, Dr. Kevin Whaley in Richmond, who in turn performed an autopsy and determined that the death occurred from homicidal violence. The most likely cause of death was strangulation or suffocation. Further studies showed two other things. The first was there had been two perimortem, meaning at or near the time of death, nasal fractures. The second was that the victim was definitely that of Hannah Elizabeth Graham. When DNA evidence was collected, investigators were able to connect Mathew to Hannah Graham's murder. But by a forensic link, they were also able to tie him to another murder which had occurred in October of 2009, that of Morgan Dana Harrington. In January of 2010, Morgan's remains were found located on a 742-acre property of the Anchorage Farm in Albemarle County, Virginia. The remains were found by the owner of that farm in a remote area of the property. The owner at first thought they were the bones of an animal, but when he got closer, he realized it was human and called the police. Morgan's death was ruled a homicide. In a stunning revelation, the remains of Hannah and Morgan were found just 6 miles apart. Forensic evidence found on Morgan's shirt matched DNA from Mathew. Unexpectedly, it also matched the assault and rape mentioned earlier that had occurred in 2005 in Fairfax, Virginia. 3 women now had been linked by the viciousness of a serial murderer and rapist. Guilty of Jesse Mathew and his past, how did this person become a serial murderer? The answer lies in the development of the individual from birth to adulthood. Specifically, the behavior a person displays is influenced by life experiences as well as certain biological factors. Serial murderers, just like all human beings, are a product of their heredity, their upbringing, and the choices they make throughout their development. February 10th of 2015, Mathew is formally charged with Hannah's murder. The charge would be first-degree murder and abduction of the victim with the intent to defile. Prosecutors would seek the death penalty for Jesse Mathew. Mathew's defense lawyer submitted a plea deal in exchange for Mathew admitting to the murders of both Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. The young women's family met to discuss the plea deal. When they learned of what it would be, they would not accept it. It was only for 25 years in prison for the murders he had committed and the hurt and damage done to the families. On March the 2nd...
Yes, if I was a family member and they gave me the option, I wouldn't have let him plead to 25 years. That's 2 murders. That's not enough. I would have been the same as these parents.
2016, Mathew entered another plea deal. He would confess to the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington in exchange for removing the death penalty from the table. Mathew's family asked the judge for leniency.
More than 6 years after Virginia Tech student Morgan Harrington was found murdered not far from where we're standing tonight, Jesse Mathew has now confessed to the crime. He also confessed today to killing Hannah Graham more than 5 years later in 2014. Now, by signing that plea agreement to both their murders, both their abductions, he has avoided the death penalty.
The trial of Jesse Mathew was just under 3 days due to the plea deal. Mathew was sentenced to life with the conditions of no early release, no possibility of geriatric release, and he would not be eligible for parole. Mathew will be serving 4 life sentences consecutively. He was also indicted for the assault and rape in Fairfax County in 2005.
Okay, so this man will die in prison. He can never get out for any reason. I think he just didn't want the death penalty. I mean, it's obvious with the way they arranged this sentencing. He can never see daylight ever, and that's a very good thing. If you like these videos, subscribe to my channel, like it, tell other people.